Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly show covering motorcycle news, better biking tips, and views generally on the world of motorcycling. I was only talking to myself here actually. I realised that I'd actually started the intro music, and I hadn't actually pressed the button that says go live. So anyway, here we are. Clive has looked in. Good to see you, Clive. Thank you for coming along once again. What have we got for you in today's show? Well, it's a fairly packed show. 385, Sunday the 19th of November. We'll be looking very quickly at the live talk events, which are back through the late autumn and winter season. Black Friday, I've got an offer already out from yesterday, and I'll be adding another one this afternoon, so keep your eyes open for that. Waka Kotahi, that's the New Zealand Transport Agency, have denied that their road caused a bike crash that put a rider in a coma. So that's a story from New Zealand. The Competition and Markets Authority here, their first marketing report shows that fuel has gone up by 11p per litre. And in Kenya, a suspicious number of bikes financed by a large credit company have subsequently been stolen. So there are interesting questions being asked in that country. Meanwhile, Lufthansa have a fly and ride option. We'll talk about that later in the show. Rather more down to earth, Benelli have launched a new range of motorcycles at the 300cc capacity bracket, and they've added 2 more bikes at 500cc too. And there's also a big surprise from Bimota, because they have produced an enduro 450, long way away from their more usual sports bike image. So finally, the in-depth item today, I did have something else lined up, but this one popped up in the news feed during the week, so I thought I'd recover it. A rider was nicked by a driver with a basically filming out of the window of their car as they went past, or passenger I should say, it's passenger side video, for using a for using the phone that was on the holder on their handlebars. And we'll have a talk about the legalities of that and the traps that could be waiting for you if you do use a mobile phone in a holder, whether you're driving or riding actually. So settle yourselves down, grab yourself a biscuit and a cuppa, and stay with me for the next 30 minutes or so whilst I go through everything here. Now, don't forget, if you do have a question, anything you want to ask, drop me a line. I'm more than happy to answer them. I'll try to get back to you during the show. If I can't, it will be at some point after the show. Right, okay, so on with the today's show. Right, so first thing is I've got some blue sky invites to give away. Now, if you know anything about the debacles going on with the platform formerly known as Twitter, you'll know that you may know that Blue Sky has been set up as a Twitter alternative. It was actually created by some employees, I believe, of Twitter who left the company. So I do have some invite codes to give away. So what I'm asking you today is have a think. How do you think I should give these away? Who do you think I should give them to? Make some suggestions, and if I get some good ones, I will see what I can do to follow those up. Right, okay, now first things first, be after Blue Sky is don't forget that tomorrow night will be the first of the live online presentations again, and I'm going back to Science of Being Seen. I am trying to cover the Science of Being Seen several times in these talks, just because there are always people who haven't seen it, and of course it's always useful to have a refresher if you haven't seen it, and I will update these talks with the latest info. The only problem is that does mean they get longer and longer because I can't leave stuff out really. But anyway, the first one is tomorrow. It's Monday the 20th, in case you've forgotten, 8 p.m. And if you want to sign up, I'm still taking applications for that. Just pop over to my coffee page. You don't have to be a member or anything to do that, and you can buy access directly through my coffee page there. £6 will get you a seat, and all that money of course goes into continuing to fund my research into sights are being seen. Ever since I created it for the fire services, I haven't received a penny in formal funding to do this research, and you know, there has been quite a lot of it. Just to give you a heads up, Peter Ramage, he said a lot of good stuff and rigorously put together with proper supporting facts. And Howard Askew, he commented about the sights of being seen after he'd come along to one of our Biker Down presentations in Kent, and he said, for sure, the course was very good about what to do in the event of an accident, but you were the only person who was giving strategic advice on avoiding becoming a casualty. And he said that I made a dispatch rider think outside of the box. It's all about avoiding those nasty accidents. So that was a comment back when I was actually delivering these courses for Kent Fire and Rescue, which I'm sad to say I no longer do. But it doesn't stop me presenting it openly on the web to anybody who wants to watch it. All right, so next thing I just want to talk about briefly is Black Friday offers. Now, Black Friday obviously is coming along. I know it's another import from the US, but hey ho, everybody else is doing it, so why shouldn't I, as they say. So I am offering some special one-off offers on the various things. Keep your eyes open, basically, find out what's on offer. The first offer went live last night. It's 2 of my shorter ebooks for the price of, well, 37% off, I think it was. So go and have a look at that. That's on coffee. You can order there. There are a limited number of each of these. The next offer will go live at 7 p.m. tonight. But if you are a supporter or subscriber on Facebook, you will be able to access the deal from 3 p.m. each day. You'll basically get first dibs on it. So look back, have a look back at yesterday's offer, and put a note in your diary for later today to have a look for the second offer. Right, okay. Now, another little piece of housekeeping before I get on with the show. I got a question after Sunday's show from Steve. He said, quote, my coffee reminder email for Elevenses arrived at 12:01. Is it supposed to arrive before the show starts? Well, the answer to that is actually no. The show goes out live on YouTube and Facebook, and what I do is create the link sometime around about 9 o'clock normally. It gives me time to have a last minute look at the morning's news after I get up, just in case something very interesting has come up. And then the advance warning goes out on those 2 channels because it's streamed live on Facebook and it's streamed live on YouTube. Now, when I finish the show, that is when I upload the video link and create the item with the embedded video in it on coffee. So yesterday, or Wednesday, the show ran 47 minutes in total. So by the time I'd grabbed the link to YouTube, cut and pasted the listing into a coffee post, and so on and so forth, it would have been just before 12 o'clock, hence the timing of Steve's alert from coffee. So I do this after the event link up for LinkedIn and Instagram too, as well as that platform formerly known as Twitter, of course, and now also on Blue Sky. There's also an audio version only of the show on Anchor, which is linked to Spotify. So there are plenty of places you can discover Elevenses. Why don't I create a specific reminder in advance for coffee? Well, I could, but the fact is that you already get announcements via email for every single new coffee item. And at the moment, as far as I am aware, there is no once a day or once a week option to change the frequency of those emails updates. And that is a feature I have actually requested that they put together. So basically, until that arrives, I try not to bombard coffee followers with too many emails every day. And in any case, I figure 11 a.m. for Elevenses isn't too tough to remember. Right, so that's all today's bits of housekeeping out the way. So where are we going next? We're going to the weather forecast, of course. So it's been a very mild weekend here in the south of England, thanks to some tropical air wrapped around a system. And it's currently actually at 12 degrees at the moment here in London, which is pretty mild for sort of getting on, well, late November. It actually got up to 16 yesterday, which is phenomenally warm, actually. I think that's a record. But the weather system associated with this stream of warm air has been carrying plenty of rain. Now, today does look showery. It looks breezy as well across the most of the UK, And the mild temperatures are penetrating more or less up to southern Scotland today. Now, Monday looks to be another mostly cloudy day, but with plenty of showers. Also looks fairly breezy, but it will remain mild. Now in all but the northwest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where the wind will pick up, but it will bring in cold air with it. Tuesday and Wednesday, it looks like we're going to move into a fairly settled pattern of weather, dull but dry. Watch out for frost Tuesday night. After that, it looks like we could get a couple of very mild days for time of year later in the week. Thursday is looking interesting at the moment. So check back on Wednesday, of course, for your next update on the weather for bikers. Right, so on to the news, and we're headed over to New Zealand for today's first story, and it's a report of a crash that left motorcyclist Hope Pearce in a coma with life-changing injuries after what was described as a horrific crash on State Highway 5 near Rotorua. Now, that's a road I've actually ridden and driven as well myself. The 36-year-old, she'd been out riding her Harley-Davidson Sportster with two friends when she lost control of the machine, and she was thrown onto the wire rope median barrier, the sort that's often referred to as a cheese cutter. Now, she can't remember the crash, but witnesses report that the bike wobbled for over 100 meters before she high-sided. She landed on the barrier. The impact ruptured her spleen, broke her left femur in two places, lacerated both kidneys and her liver, fractured her sternum, ribs and spine, and caused a collapsed lung. And after that, it sounds like the engine burns on her right leg and the extensive bruising seemed fairly trivial. Now, she was in an induced coma for 2 days. She required 2 surgeries, and it will take at least 2 years for her to make even a partial recovery from these injuries. So what actually caused the crash? Well, let's go and have a quick look at the highway involved. If I just zoom in on that picture for you so you can see it a little bit more clearly. This is the photograph taken at the scene. And you can see the state of the road there. Now, Hope has stated that she believes the condition of the road, which she says had potholes, build-up patches of tar seal and unevenness in general, she believes there were significant factors in causing the accident. But Waka Kotahi, that's the NZ Transport Agency, they've rejected her claim, saying the road is fit for purpose and there was no evidence the road condition was a major contributor to her crash. The acting regional manager of maintenance and operations for Waka Kotahi Bay of Plenty area, Roger Brady, said in a written response to the Bay of Plenty Times, which is where the photo comes from, actually, that the agency takes state highway maintenance very seriously. And he goes on to say, Waka Kotahi has found no evidence to suggest that the road condition was a major contributor to the crash, and the NZ police investigation will determine the likely contributing factors. There were no defects requiring repairs noted for any time around the date of this crash. And they went on to say that the section of road was actually set to be resealed this New Zealand summer, so that's in the coming next 3 months or so, and areas were marked out for some pre-seal repairs. But when they concluded that no reactive maintenance was required as a result of the crash, and Waka Kotahi considers the road is still fit for purpose. Police spokesman said the investigation into the crash continues, and the officer in charge couldn't comment yet on what might have caused it. But that photograph there, let me just zoom in a little bit on it, and what you can see here is how the New Zealand authorities actually treat their roads. What they do is they rip off the old surface, then they put down this chip seal. It's the same treatment that we have in the UK really with the surface dressing, I think we call it here, and basically there's a resin layer spread over the old road surface, and then they put the fine chipping down on top of it. The trouble is that whilst it gives you a pretty abrasive surface when it's brand new, where the vehicles repeatedly run over it, what tends to happen is that the chip gets driven into the layer beneath it, the resin layer, and you end up with these shiny patches of tar. And as I discovered myself when I was over there, they are very slippery indeed when wet. Now in the dry, probably not so much of a problem, but yeah, they can ripple as well, these surfaces, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of investigation going on into just what caused that particular crash. But anyway, hopes for a speedy recovery from the hope involved in that fairly horrible crash there. Right, so okay, carry on with the news. Now, you may recall, and this is something I covered back in the summer, there was a year-long in-depth study that showed that fuel prices are a market where competition is, quote, not working as well as it should. And back in July, the Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, they recommended a monitoring body should be established to report on the state of the road fuel market here in the UK. Now, the government have accepted that recommendation. That allowed the CMA to start their monitoring process, and they have just published their first report, and they say more will follow on a quarterly basis. So what the CMA did was they looked at fuel prices at the pump for drivers from the end of May 2023 to the end of October 2023, and what they found was this: overall, pump prices for both petrol and diesel have increased by 11.1 pence per litre for petrol, 13.9p for diesel since May. And the report says this is down to two different factors. Now, during June, July and August, they say it appears to have been driven by global factors such as increased crude oil prices. But when wholesale prices reduced in September and October, they say that it appears the retail prices did not come back down in line. Now, the CMA say it's too early to draw definitive conclusions, but quote, it could indicate a lack of competitive response from fuel retailers if this trend continues. And the CMA promises to monitor these developments. The CMA also looked at the fuel margins, essentially the difference between wholesale purchase and pump retail price, and they found that the margins did indeed fall in May when the supermarkets were making an average of 11.9 pence per litre, and that dropped to 7.3 pence per litre by August, reflecting the higher wholesale prices. Now, they don't have any data yet for September and October, but what they did say was that in August, the margin, even though it had dropped by 5p or so, was still higher than any recorded in any year prior to 2021. Now, there is inflation presumably to take into account, but this does paint a fairly worrying picture. There is one report I've seen suggests that drivers been overcharged by 0.9 billion pounds. Now, that wasn't a particularly reliable source, it was GB News, so I'm not going to say that that is actually correct, but we do have this monitoring capability now. Now, it is on an interim basis at the moment. It lacks the compulsory information gathering powers that the CMA want, and that's because the necessary legislation has yet to pass through Parliament, and that means, incidentally, that one major fuel retailer actually refused or failed to respond to the request for the information, and that was Shell. And that does make me wonder what they have to hide. Now, over in Kenya, a state committee wants a credit card company investigated, and this is over complaints of exploitation and what was described in the news story as the suspicious loss of motorbikes sold to boda boda operators by the credit company. Boda bodas are the motorcycle taxis, as you probably know, and the customers of Watu Credit Limited have registered numerous complaints against the company because of the rampant theft of motorcycles that were purchased with their credit. Now, Nandi Senator Samson Klaragai, he said there was no way motorcycles from the firm would suddenly get stolen soon after customers completed their payment if they were fitted with trackers. And he said, quote, "We're curious to know how the motorcycles are stolen, yet they have trackers. Who disables the trackers? They've not provided anything to show they have reported cases of theft of their motorcycles." So it appears that the credit card company is actually getting the trackers fitted to bikes that they sell. So a second senator then questioned why the majority of the stolen motorcycles are payment are for bikes where payments are almost completed. And he said that the company did not provide any evidence to the committee that they've reported again that there had been any theft. And he said, quote, "It looks like people working under the Waka credit tracking system are the ones who are giving out the information." Now, Waka Credit's chief executive officer, Andris Kaneps, he said their firm is on the radar because they supply almost 70% of all the motorcycles that are sold on credit in that country. So the chances are that a stolen bike being financed by them is quite high, and they say more than 50% of the motorcycles stolen are less than 6 months old because thieves don't like old motorcycles, which seems slightly dubious, but anyway, hey ho. The company, though, is also under fire for what have been described as exorbitant interest rates, which are 6% per month, which has been described as exploitation. Basically, what that does is it doubles the retail price of a motorcycle over the payment period that most motorcyclists go for, presumably the longest they can afford. Anyway, Waka Credit argued that the rate reflected the risk. The Senate committee is considering setting up a special committee to investigate the activities of this asset financing company. So dubious goings on there in Kenya. Now, rather more upmarket, if you don't fancy the idea of taking a ferry, then riding a bike to your destination, and you don't fancy flying on a cattle class plane and then renting a bike for an exorbitant rate when you get to your destination either, then perhaps the Lufthansa Explorer is the answer. It's being described as a party plane. Here it is. Now, the German airline has basically taken a wide-body jet, and what they've done is incorporated a garage with 2 Braus motorcycles in it. You also get a spa, a circular bar, which is said to be stylish, and the main room has multiple sofas and coffee tables, plus a retractable dining table and pop-up DJ decks, which transforms the space into a dance floor. There are also projectors built into walls and ceilings. And if you get tired of the party, you can head out onto the balcony, which you can see here has been built into a cargo hatch. And finally, when you've had enough of it all, you can take one of the multiple bedrooms that are on board, which sleep up to 12 people. And when you're refreshed and ready to ride next morning, just head down to the garage. There it is. That's in the rear of the plane, and you have a glass floor indeed above you where you can look down onto your 2 Braus 1300R motorcycles, which are a limited edition bike based on a KTM V-twin engine, producing 180 horsepower at 9,500 RPM and 140 Newton meters of torque, if you are interested in that. So guide price for one of these planes, well, think around $403 million. So not exactly pocket money, is it? I think actually they throw in the bikes for free though once you've bought the plane, so there is some benefit there for you. Right, okay, so having quickly looked at one bike, let's head back to planet Earth. And I mentioned Suzuki's low interest offer on selected new bikes last Sunday, but the company is now adding complimentary heated grips to the inducements to go Suzuki with your next new bike, just so long as it's registered by the 31st of January 2024. Now, they say that the grips have 3 available settings, and you can have them fitted to a number of new models, including the GSX S1000GX, which was just announced. That should be arriving in dealerships within a couple of weeks, and also the rest of the GSX range, the GSX S1000 GT and GT Plus, the GSX S1000, the GSX S950, the Katana, and the that all-new machine that I just mentioned. They can also be fitted to the V-Strom 1050s, the V-Strom 800, and the Hayabusa, and also the GSX 8S. They're all included in the deal. Now, Suzuki GB head of motorcycles Jonathan Martin said, While everyone loves dry roads and warm asphalt, riding through winter can be equally rewarding or for some necessary. We want to make it better for those riders by making it easier to keep their hands warm and toasty in cold weather. But if you really want to stay warm rather than just get toasty fingers, get a heated vest. And if you want a full explanation for why, then check out the two staying warm in-depth items in Elevenses 378 and 380. They went out on Wednesday the 25th of October and Wednesday the 1st of November, right in time for the cold weather. So go and have a look at those and it will explain the pros of a heated vest. Now, Benelli, it's a success story as a company, just not in the UK. From being an almost forgotten brand name, the Italian marque has actually bounced back remarkably in the home country of Italy, of course. 2021, the Benelli TRK 502 outsold all other motorcycles in Italy. It's a mid-sized A2 license adventure bike. And in the first half of last year, 8,500 plus Benellis of all shapes and sizes were sold. And that made Benelli the best-selling manufacturer in Italy. I'm sure there are a couple of other Italian manufacturers who are a bit disappointed to hear that. But what's even more remarkable, really, given the general distrust of Chinese motorcycles here in the UK, is that Benelli's parent company is Jiang Motors, who have their own QJ motor brand, which shares the motors and frames with Benelli. The bikes may be designed in Pesaro in Italy at the Benelli Design Centre, but Benelli motorcycles are built in China. And now Benelli are seeking to build on this success with two new ranges, which they actually showed off, of course, at this year's EICMA Milan show. The first are a pair of entry-level bikes targeted at younger riders. The BKX 300 and the bike we see here, the BKX 300S. They're built around the same chassis and a brand new 394cc single engine, and it's in the now familiar liquid cooled 4-valve format. So that's the naked. The other bike, as I say, gets adventure bike styling. So it gets a 17-inch front wheel as opposed to this one, which has a 17 and 17 matching front and rear. The motor itself appears to be derived from the older 250. It's been given a bigger bore, bigger intake and exhaust valves. It gets a revised combustion chamber. Powers 29.2 horsepower at 9,000 RPM, 18 foot-pounds of torque, 7,000 RPM. So fairly pokey, not too bad for a 300. But it does get a new balance shaft apparently to smooth the engine out, and the 6-speed gearbox also comes now with a slipper clutch. Now also on display were a pair of 500s, the Tornado 500 and the Tornado Naked. They are both again aimed at the A2 market. This is the Benelli Tornado 500, and you can see it takes on the sports bike image. Now it shares the frame and engine again with the Naked, which we'll have a look at in just a moment, but it gets that full fairing and it gets clip-on handlebars to give it that sort of sporty look. And this will go head-to-head with bikes like Honda's new CBR 500R and Kawasaki's new Ninja 500. So over to the Benelli Tornado 500 Naked. Now it really is called Naked. That really is its name apparently. And the interesting thing about this is it actually looks to have pinched the headlight styling from Tornado's Speed Triple Series, though the press release claims that the signature formed by the daytime running lights creates a T-shape when viewed from the front. All I can say to that is Now the 4-stroke liquid cooled 8-valve parallel twin, it's the same seen in other popular models, including that TRK 502, so there's plenty of provenance now to say how reliable that machine is. Also in the Leoncini 500, and it delivers max power 47.6 horsepower, so that's sort of pretty much bang on the 35 kilowatt limit for these machines. At 8,500, so it's not too revvy. Peak torque's 46 newton meters at 6,000 RPM, so it grunts along quite nicely. And the engine has been updated apparently to comply with Euro 5 standards. I have to admit, I thought they would have had to have done that some time ago. But anyway, both machines are built around a traditional steel trellis frame. You get Marzocchi upside down forks. That's another Chinese-owned brand, incidentally. And you get an adjustable monoshock at the rear. Brembo brakes with ABS. They act on 17-inch alloy rims, front and rear. And the display is the now familiar 5-inch colour TFT. There must be a factory somewhere turning these out by the million for the modern crop of motorcycles. And of course, the machine now gets Bluetooth connectivity with the app. And you get the welcome edition, actually, of a tyre pressure management system as well, which is something I would far rather have than things that connect with your phone and music and all that kind of stuff. So look for these bikes. They should be arriving in the spring. Price and colour options not yet finalised, apparently. Now, in contrast to these new machines from Benelli, and very much likely to be in the if you have to ask you can't afford it category, are a pair of new off-road motorcycles from another Italian company, but one with a much longer history of building sports exotica, and that is Bimota. This is the BX450. Now there apparently are two models of this. There is a genuine off-road model which doesn't have lights, and this is the BX450, which appears to be a homologated road legal enduro. Now, where do they get the innards from? Well, basically, it's the Kawasaki's strictly off-road KX450. It retains not just the 449 liquid-cooled double-head cam 4-valve single, but also the same aluminium twin-spar frame, and also retains Kawasaki's fitment of 49mm Showa forks and the Unitrack rear end. And interestingly, the suspension is usually the first thing that Bimota's engineers tend to tamper with, but they've left it all be. Similarly, the brakes are Nissan, and they are also retained. Why? Well, I'm guessing that unlike a lot of Bimota's earlier bikes, most modern machines are actually already so good it's actually very, very hard to improve on the formula. Now, what Bimota have done is added an electric start. They have uprated the ECU with what they call specific mapping. They've given it a traction control system, and the bikes also get an arrow exhaust system as standard, and as you can see, it's gained lights. Now, the spoked wheels, they get Metzler 6-day mud and snow tyres, 90 100 21 at the front and a 140 80 18 at the rear. Now, the addition of the lights, the retention of the engine and chassis, the addition of an electric start, and what that leads me to question is just how Bimota have actually managed to make the bike lighter. That's what they claim, which is still a featherweight, 110 kilos, 242 pounds, but adding stuff doesn't normally make things lighter. It's usually the opposite, taking things off it. Maybe the exhaust accounts for that. Who knows? I don't know. But anyway, get your wallet ready, because the production run is likely to be limited to just a few hundred units. Right, okay, so I meant to put this up a little bit earlier, but don't forget, if you enjoy the show, do set yourself a reminder. It goes out at 11 on Sundays and Wednesdays, almost always live. Occasionally it goes out recorded, and very rarely I miss a show or have to alter the start time for one reason and another. Easiest way to catch up with any of the old shows, including those two I mentioned earlier about heated clothing, is to head over to my YouTube channel, find the ELEVENSES playlist, and just scroll back through it. All the old ELEVENSES are there. Right, so on to today's in-depth item. Now, this involves a video which I'll show you a little bit, a clip from later, or I'll show you a photograph anyway, still photo. And this is about the use of mobile phones on bikes. Now, this actually dovetails fairly neatly into something I wrote a fortnight ago in my Tips on Tuesday series for newbie riders, telling them not to, some mistakes that they can usefully avoid. And the one I wrote as I say, not very long ago, was all about not distracting ourselves with mobile phones, simply turn them off when we're on the bike. And the reason for this is, as a new rider, there's plenty to think about already, and we really don't want to distract ourselves. Now, this was in response to a rider, well, actually a proto rider, because he had only just passed his theory test and hadn't even taken a CBT yet, but he was already asking, what handlebar Bluetooth unit should I fit to my bike to control my phone and my music? And my essay really was all about the cognitive distractions that are caused by using a phone or even listening to music. You know, if you don't believe me on that one, go and read the article. You will find it again in the back catalogue of Coffee Posts a couple of weeks ago. The effects have been well studied. It is known that using a mobile phone, the cognitive interaction with the phone actually results in distraction. It's not just the physical interaction with the handheld phone, which so many thought was dangerous in the first place. It is actually the fact that we have to think about our conversation, and that takes away our attention from the road. But what I didn't discuss on that article was the legal implication of having a phone on the bike. And by coincidence, the West Midlands police have issued a rather self-congratulatory video patting themselves on the back for what they describe as taking action on. Fairly astonishing, 81% of 738 dashcam videos submitted to them last month, which rather suggests that they see this as a good way of bumping up their crime figures. And it just happens to contain a clip of a rider tapping away at his phone. So let's just zoom in on that and give you a good look at it. And as you can see what it says there is, of the 734 cases last month, we took action in 81% of them. So you can see the rider there, one hand on the handlebar, and they've blurred out his helmet, but he appears to be looking down at his phone, and he appears to be, his thumb is poised over the top of it, clearly tapping the screen. And as I say, there is a video of this which I'll link to in a minute. Now, this is where things get interesting, because the unfortunate rider was fined and given points on his license. Now, why unfortunate? Well, because touching the phone is not in itself illegal. Now, I generally like to think I keep up with rule changes, and I certainly knew all about the mobile phone laws when they were changed to make it illegal to use a phone at the wheel, and they also matched that offence to a hefty fine and a lot of points, and that has actually got a bigger fine and more points as well in another change to the legislation trying to deter people from using handheld phones. Now, I admit I read all that stuff at the time that when it came out, and until a couple of weeks back I actually believed that touching any phone in a car when the car or bike had the engine running was actually illegal, not just when the vehicle was in motion, but even when stopped, pulled over, stopped at lights, for example, or pulled over at the side of the road. If the engine was running, then it was illegal. Now, what changed my thinking? Well, I was somewhat surprised to discover the black belt barrister, a popular YouTuber, disagrees with me, and he, as you'd expect, he knows precisely where to turn the pages to find the very specific legislation. And it turns out that when listing what you can't do with a mobile, the legislation specifies handheld phones. And as he points out, if it's held in a cradle, then you're not holding it. So at first thinking, you might be forgiven that what the rider here was doing is not therefore illegal, but there are two caveats, and the first one of which the black belt barrister did actually point out. He said there is still, of course, the potential for a careless driving charge. Now, the offence of driving without due care and attention, or careless driving, it falls under Section 3 of the Road Traffic Act 1988, and it is committed when a defendant's driving, I'm quoting from the official government advice here, when the defendant's driving falls below the standard expected of a competent and careful driver. And then it gives you the the RTA Act in detail. Now, what this basically means is, what's driving without attention? What it means, lacking consideration for other road users. It means not paying attention to what you're doing. So, for example, some examples of this potential offence would be tailgating, failing to look properly, whatever that means, sudden braking, which might impact somebody behind you, of course, overtaking on the inside. Now, lots of people will point out that there is nothing in the highway code that says you can't pass a vehicle on the inside, but overtaking on the inside on a motorway, for example, if you didn't do it very carefully, it could be construed as careless driving. Turning into the path of another driver is also a potential hit for careless driving. Two other offences which may fall in this bracket. If you've been driving down the road and you've had your attention diverted by a distraction outside the car, for example, maybe you rubbernecked at a crash in the opposite carriageway and then you run into the car ahead of you, that could be careless driving. And of course, as we've just seen, if you've had your attention diverted by a distraction such as your mobile phone in a holder, that could also be careless driving. Now, I'm not a legal eagle, and I don't see that rider swerving around in the road or making a hazard of himself or impacting other drivers. He's just driving in a straight line at a fairly steady speed, tapping his phone. Go and have a look at the video in a moment. But there is a second offence that can be applied to tapping a phone in a cradle, and that can be car or bike, of course. And I would guess that's what was being used here. And this time it's the charge of not being in proper control of a motor vehicle. Now, this is actually an offence that has been around for ages. A courier buddy of mine was actually nicked for taking both hands off the bars on a motorway to stretch his shoulders, and you know, he was no harm to any other traffic. He was just sitting in the lane, big empty gap behind him. Just happened, of course, to be a police car that he hadn't spotted some distance behind him. They caught him on camera, and he got a points on his license for that. Now, but those recent legislation changes for using mobile phones in holders seems to give you carte blanche to tap away at the phone as much as you want, because the rules specify those handheld phones. So I've seen it suggested that this is the offence that the police are looking at now to nick people who are actually spotted tapping their screen in their holder while driving the car. Now, I would be interested to see police stats for that, but anyway. Now, next question, of course, is how does this apply to other things, such as this device here? Now, this is what the original person asking the question was concerned about. It was something like this, which is basically a bolt-on Bluetooth phone controller, and that's what I mentioned back at the top of the show. You link the holder on the left to the intercom on the right, and then you can control it without having to reach around and tap the buttons on your helmet. But the problem is we're still tapping buttons. We're still potentially distracted. And then that leads me to an even more interesting question, because what about this? Now, this is the cluster, the instrument cluster, which you now get fitted to the left-hand side of a BMW. This is actually a BMW R18, which hence all the chrome to the right. But basically, you look at that and work out all the functions that you have got on that. Menu, mode, you can see them on, off, set, res, I'm not quite sure what that it does, and there appears to be a little multi-direction switch down under the indicators on the right hand side as well. So there's all sorts of things going on. There's a wheel as well on the left by the twist grip, which I happen to know scrolls through modes on the screen. So basically, all of this can be adjusted on the move. Now, someone will no doubt try to tell me at this point that it can all be done without taking your eyes off the road, but frankly, fumbling around trying to find the right bits of switchgear by feel is actually likely to be far more distracting than simply taking your eyes off the road, looking down at the switchgear, finding the right bit you actually want to touch or fiddle with, and then looking back at the road having fiddled with it. But the problem is, of course, that that could potentially leave us open to this not being in a position to control the bike, because you're going to have to pretty much take your hand off the handlebar to press some of these buttons. They're so far from the grip. Anyway, that is my thinking on this. That's enough for today. I just want to leave you to go out there and ponder all this. Now, I would suggest two things: that you have a look at the original video by the Black Belt Barrister. I'll put that up, and I'll also going to put up the link to the original video by the West Midlands Police. And what I suggest that you do is have a look at both of those, and you have a think about it all for yourself, and see what your conclusions are. And as always with these items, I would be very interested in your feedback while you tell me what you think about the business of tapping away at a phone on the move, or using these multifunction devices like the add-on Bluetooth headset controller, or the built-in controllers that are now appearing on motorcycles. So do go away and have a look at that and tell me what you think. I think the video link might have been truncated. It has. Right, let's just put that up again. You got the Black Belt Barrister link there, and that's the one for the motorcyclist being nicked by West Midlands Police. Yeah, okay, that's easier to find. Right, okay, so that is it pretty much for today. Don't forget that if you enjoy these in-depth items and you enjoy the show generally, do subscribe and like on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. You can do both. Do share them with your friends as well if you think there's an interesting item which people want to know about. That's always good for me because it keeps people coming back. And finally, before I wrap up the show, I just want to give you a shout out to my latest supporters who are here. So that's the list. It's Paul, Brian, Christine, Hallam, Clive, Nigel, Claire and Anonymous. Thank you almightily for your support. I very much appreciate it. And of course, if you're not yet a supporter, do pop over to my coffee pages, take a look at what's over there. As I said, it's likely to be the biggest resource of better biking information for riders anywhere on the internet. There's everything from free articles over there to downloadable copies or some of my paperbacks, and of course don't forget those Black Friday offers. So if you like all that, drop me a coffee, get all that access, get your name in lights here, and keep an eye open for those specials. All right, that is it for today. Thank you very much indeed, and I will hopefully see you for the next show, which will be on Wednesday. Not quite sure what's going in that one yet, but hopefully it'll be an interesting one for you. And if you are out there this week riding around, do keep an eye on the weather and make sure that you stay shiny side up.